Oh, a deal. I am very thankful to the two of you, and I am delighted to deal with you. There was something strange about those words. Why was it so grateful to the two of them? It bothered Gringam, but given the overwhelmingly unfavorable circumstances before him, he could not ask the other party such a question. We would like to ask you to allow us to safely leave this room. I see. It is only natural that you should think that way. However, even if you two gentlemen do manage to leave this room, your current location is within the second floor of the great underground tomb of Nazareth. It behooves me to mention that returning to the surface will be very difficult. The second floor. Those words made Gringham's eyes go wide. We passed through the mausoleum on the surface, descended a flight of stairs and passed through a doorway. Was that the first floor? Many would regard it as such, would they not? No, I was simply confirming that. Haha, well, you two gentlemen were teleported here from the first floor. Your confusion is eminently justified. Somehow, Kyuhuku was nodding. Gringam felt like he had been stabbed by icicles when he saw it. This was a terror born of his suspicions being proven right. In other words, while he did not know how they had done it, their opposition used teleportation magic as a trap. What kind of spell was it, and what kind of magical technology had they used? He knew how shocking this was despite not being a magic caster. Indeed, I'm hoping you can tell us how to leave this tomb, but I dare not ask so much. Just allowing us to leave this room will be enough. HM. We are willing to give you anything you desire. I see. Kyuhuka nodded deeply, and looked as though it were deep in thought. For a short while, the interior of the room was deathly silent. In the end, Kyuhuka seemed to have made up its mind. It nodded and said, "What I desire is already within my grasp. The terms you gentlemen propose do not satisfy me." Gringam was about to open his mouth, but Kyuhuka raised a foreleg to stop him, and then said, "Before that, it seems you do not understand the reason for my gratitude towards the two of you. Then, permit me to explain. In truth, my familiars have long grown tired of eating each other. Thus, I am grateful that the two of you are going to become their feed." Ah! The thief loosed an arrow immediately upon hearing that. The arrow whistled through the air, but Kyuhuka's crimson cape caught it, and it fell powerlessly. Then the room began to writhe. Countless rustling noises echoed through the room, and it became a torrent of sound. Then, a tsunami loomed over them. It was a churning flow of darkness. Regretfully, there are only the two of you, but even so, I hope you will fill my familiars' bellies. The swell of the tidal wave swallowed Gringam and the thief. It looked just like being devoured by the ocean. As Gringam sank into the black whirlpool, he frantically swatted at the cockroaches, which had worked their way into the gaps of his armor. Weapons were useless against a swarm of such tiny insects, and Gringam did not know any martial arts which could attack an area. In that case, smacking them with his hands would be faster. Therefore, he had already cast aside his weapon, and he did not know where it had gone. He struggled and tried to flail his arms, but the countless cockroaches weighing him down had already taken his freedom of movement. His actions were just like a drowning man thrashing his arms about. All Gringam could hear was the rustling of countless cockroaches. His thief companion's voice was drowned out by the rustling, and he could not hear it. No, it only made sense that he could not hear the thief's voice. That was because the thief's mouth, throat and stomach were stuffed full of cockroaches, and he could not vocalize. Prickling pain filled Gringham's body from head to toe. It was the pain from the cockroaches, which had infiltrated through the gaps in his armor, and were chewing at his flesh. Stop! Gringam wanted to cry out, but the cockroaches working their way into his mouth blocked it up. He frantically tried to spit out the cockroaches, but every time he opened his mouth, another cockroach would squirm in through his lips, and then crawl around in his mouth. Tiny cockroaches seemed to have burrowed into his ears. The rustling grew louder, and his ears were unbearably itchy. Countless cockroaches crawled up and down his face, biting everywhere. Pain covered his eyelids. However, he could not open his eyes. He could imagine what would happen to his eyes if he did so. Gringam understood what sort of fate awaited him. He would be eaten alive by cockroaches. I don't want this. He screamed out loud, and the cockroaches promptly flowed into his mouth. They wriggled everywhere, and then burrowed into the depths of his throat. Then he felt something slide down his throat into his stomach. The sensation of a live cockroach thrashing around in his guts made him want to throw up. Gringam struggled desperately once more. He could not bear to die like this. He wanted his two elder brothers to look at him with different eyes. This was the sole, driving purpose which had motivated him, and let him reach his present position. Gringam had saved up enough that he could spend his days in leisure even without adventuring, and with his reputation, he could easily marry a beautiful woman, the likes of which one could not find in a village. Be it in terms of strength or wealth, he was far superior to his elder brothers who had chased him from the house. He should have been a winner in life. He did not want to die in a place like this. Abuba. I want to go back à la vie, he screamed as he spat out chewed-up cockroaches. But you can endure. Then, another helping for you. Gringham's cries vanished into the black vortex several seconds later. His eyes suddenly opened. A ceiling came into view. Said ceiling was made of fitted stone slabs, and there was an object which emitted white light set into it. He did not know how he had come to be here, but when he thought to look around, he realized that his head could not move. No, it was not just his head. His arms, his legs, his waist and his chest were bound by something and immobilized. These incomprehensible circumstances sparked terror within him. He wanted to scream, but something was stuck in his mouth. He could not speak, and he could not close his mouth. All he could do was move his eyes. He frantically tried to see what was going on around him, and just then a voice addressed him. Aaron, so you're awake. That voice was garbled. It was difficult to determine if it belonged to a female or a male. A horrific monster worked its way into his immobilized field of vision, appearing before him. That thing had a human's body, but its head was a bizarre object that looked like a deformed octopus. It trailed 6 long, twitching tentacles that descended to its thighs. Its skin was the cloudy white color of a drowned corpse. Its body was swollen like the aforementioned drowned corpse, with a few bands of black leather to substitute for clothing. Those bands bit into its skin, looking just like butcher's twine used to wrap up cuts of meat, and it was hideous beyond belief. Perhaps they would have been bewitchingly alluring on a beautiful woman, but on a spine-chilling monster like this, it was less seductive than stomach-churning. The monster's hands sprouted 4 slender fingers each, with webs between them. They had long nails, each with beautiful nail polish applied, and they were further adorned with strange nail art. This bizarre being looked at him with cloudy, pupilless eyes. Yufufu. Did you sleep well? Ha ha ha. His breathing was heavy under the twin assaults of fear and shock. The monster caressed his cheek with a gentle gesture, like a mother comforting a child. The strangely cold sensation sent a chill through his entire body. It would have been perfect if it emitted a heavy scent of blood or rot. However, it instead radiated a floral fragrance. That only served to heighten his sense of terror. There's no need to shrink in fear. The creature's line of sight moved to his groin, and the sensation of the air against his skin let him finally realize that he was naked. Should I ask you for your name? The monster placed its hand on what seemed to be its cheek and tilted its head. Surely it would have been a delightful gesture if a woman had done it, but instead it was an octopus-headed creature that looked like a drowned corpse. All he felt was disgust and fear. He could only move his eyeballs, and the monster laughed at him. Its mouth was covered by its tentacles, and its expression did not seem to have changed. However, he could still tell that it was laughing, because its cold, glassy, marble-like eyes were narrowed. Yufufu, you don't want to tell me? You're so shy, how adorable. The monster's hand slid over his chest, like it was tracing out letters, but all he felt was panic, like his heart might be ripped out at any time. Let me tell you my name, love, the creature said, in a saccharine though garbled voice that sounded like it was appending hearts to the end of every sentence it said. I'm Neuronist, the special intelligence gathering officer of the great underground tomb of Nazareth. However, everyone also calls me the torturer. The long tentacles moved, exposing the round mouth at their base. The mouth was edged with a rung of sharp teeth, and a glistening, slender tube, that looked like a tongue snaked out of it, like a straw. Afterwards, I'll use this to suck you dry, suck what dry. He was so afraid that he tried to contort his body, but he was firmly bound. All right, it's like this. We caught you. Indeed, his last memories were of the thief and Gringam running ahead of him and vanishing. After that, he did not recall anything until now. You do know where you are, don't you? Neuronist chuckled, and then continued. This is the great underground tomb of Nazarick, you know. The kingdom of the only member of the 41 supreme beings who stayed behind, Momono, Ain Sama. It is the most honored place in the world. Ain Hohaha? Indeed, Ain Sama. Newtonist understood his poorly pronounced words as its hand wandered over his skin. He's one of the 41 supreme beings, and the leader who once coordinated the other supreme beings. And he's also a very, very charming man. Anyone who sees him would want to pledge their utmost loyalty to him. As for me, if I were fortunate enough to be called to Ain Sama's bed, I would gladly offer him my first time. The way this monster shyly twisted its body could not be considered adorable, but abhorrent. I'll tell you something. The monster began tracing letters on his chest, like a young girl in the throes of her first crush. The last time Ain Sama visited me, he was staring at my body. His gaze was like a male beast selecting its prey. After that, he seemed embarrassed, and then turned his eyes away. It made my heart race and my spine shiver at this point. The creature stopped moving and brought its face over, staring into his eyes. He desperately tried to distance himself from that frightening visage, but his body could not move. That little brat Sheltier, and that ugly freak Albedo both seemed to be enjoying Ain Sama's attentions, but no matter how you think of it, I'm more attractive than them. Don't you think? Ah, ha Hinku though. What manner of fate would befall him if he dared disagree with her? The fear of that made him agree with her. Neuronist narrowed her eyes in delight, and it clapped its hands together, and looked into the air. It looked just like a zealot praying to the heavens. Fufufu, you're sweet. Or are you just telling the truth? Still, for some reason, Ain Sama has never called for me. Ah, Ain Sama, your stoic attitude is so attractive. The monster was so moved that it shuddered, and it made him think of a segmented worm crawling around. Ah, I've gone all shivery. Era, pardon me, I've been talking all this while. Please forget all about me. Neuronist ignored his mental prayer, and continued, let me tell you what your fate will be. You know what a chorus is, don't you? He rolled his eyes at the sudden question. After seeing his confused reaction, Neuronist seemed to think he did not know, and so it began to explain. They are a choir that sings hymns and psalms, praising the love and glory of God. I want to have you join the chorus, along with your friends. If that was all, then it would be nothing much. While he was not very confident in his singing voice, he was not completely tone-deaf. However, was this monster's aim truly so simple? He could not hide the unease within him, and he glanced at Neuronist out of the corner of his eyes. Oh yes, it's a chorus. Even a fool like you who has not sworn his all to Ain Sama can make an offering to Ain Sama, if you but raise your voice and sing. We will have your singing in unison be our objective. Ah, my body's gone shivery again. This shall be the gospel music that Neuronist will offer to Ain Sama. A smoky color filled those disgusting eyeballs. Perhaps the monster was feeling excited about its idea. Its narrow, slender fingers writhed like worms. Fufufu. All right. I'll introduce you to the people who will help you sing in harmony. They had probably been waiting in a corner of the room, but several people suddenly appeared in his field of vision. Once he saw those people, he momentarily forgot to breathe, because he knew that they were evil creatures at a glance. They wore tight black leather aprons. Their bodies were not so much white as cream-colored. Below that skin were, if blood could be, purplish blood vessels. Their heads were covered in seamless black leather masks. There was no telling how they could see or even breathe. Their arms were also very long. Each of them was about 2 meters tall, but their arms extended down below their knees. The belts at their waists contained countless work tools. There were 4 of these vile creatures. They are torturers. These kids will help you sing with a sweet voice. He had a very bad feeling about this. He suddenly realized what singing meant, and he frantically twisted his body in an attempt to escape, but his body still could not move. It's useless, your strength won't be able to break them. These boys will use healing magic on you, so you can practice to your heart's content. I'm very gentle, aren't I? Neuronist said in a voice nuanced with wickedness. Ruthai. What's wrong? Do you want me to stop? Neuronist asked him that question as he shouted, and the tears welled up in his eyes. Then it lightly waggled its 6 tentacles. Listen now, all right, we, the creations of the Supreme Beings, have value in existing because that great person chose to stay behind. Serving that great person is our reason for existence. How could we possibly pity miserable little thieves like you, who tracked dirt into the home of the noble Supreme One with your filthy little feet? Did you really think I would take pity on you? Aura. Yes. You're right. Regret is very important. Neuronist produced a slender rod from somewhere. At its tip was a 5mm long section covered in spikes. We'll start with this. He had no idea what it was for, but Neuronist was only too happy to explain. I hear that my creator was afflicted by a disease called urinary stones. In order to show my respect for him, we shall begin with this. As it happens, you're so small now, so I imagine it'll go in very easily. Ruthai. He wailed as he realized what was going to happen to him, and Neuronist brought its face up to his. We're going to be together for a very long time. If you're going to cry and make a fuss over this much, it won't end well for you, you know? Part 3. Each team had taken a different route at the crossroads, and among them Aria Uzrath had simply charged straight ahead, on the baseless assumption that there would be a strong enemy waiting for him in the tomb's depths. He encountered stone doors and countless turns along the way, and he picked each one at random, walking silently through the tomb. His route was peaceful, which bored him. They had not even encountered any traps, much less monsters. Perhaps I picked the wrong route. As Aria thought that, he clicked his tongue. Hurry up already, slowpoke, Aria barked at the elf walking 10 meters ahead of him as she was about to stop. The elf slave quivered for just a second before walking tiredly on. She had been walking continuously ever since they had entered the ROM, and she had not been permitted to slacken her pace. Fortunately, nothing had happened so far, but if there had been traps, she could very well have died. The way he was using his slaves was not so much trap-finding, as having her serve as a canary in a mine. Aria's team was composed of himself and 3 elf slaves with skills different from his, a ranger, a priest and a druid. Giving such an order to someone like her, who possessed irreplaceable searching skills, was too much of a waste. However, he had his reasons. Simply put, he was tired of the elf in front of him. Surely anyone would be shocked when they heard that answer. Their shock would not be a matter of ethics, but economics. Slaves from the slain theocracy were not cheap. This was particularly true of elves, whose looks and skills caused their price to soar. In most cases, elves were shockingly expensive merchandise, and not something an average citizen could afford. Among them, those elves with special skills cost as much as a magic weapon enchanted with special effects. Even someone like Aria could not simply buy one because he wanted to. However, Tenba's income was monopolized by Aria, and so as long as a job was successful, he could make the money back quickly. Therefore, once he got tired of a slave, he did not particularly mind if she died. I'll buy one with bigger breasts next time, Aria thought as he looked at the back of the tired-seeming elf. Squeezing their breasts and making them scream ought to be fun. Since this job was a cooperative effort with other teams, he had not bedded the elves for several days. Granted, nobody would say anything even if he had slept with them, but jealousy brought about displeasure. That was not advantageous, and as a worker, Aria knew at least that much. Therefore his pent-up lust had led Aria to these thoughts. Or maybe, Next time I'll ask for someone like that bitch's type. One of Foresight's members appeared in Aria's mind, the half-elf who had been glaring at Aria. That bitch was truly an eyesore. She also had a girlish-looking female next to her, but Aria felt that the girl's distaste for him was understandable. Women often did not understand the libido of men, and girls of that age ought to have some desire for purity. However, life forms that were inferior to human beings did not deserve to look at mankind with an expression like that. Just thinking about it filled Aria's handsome features with rage. I want to bash that slut's face in, beat her until she can't resist anymore. The elf slaves were thoroughly broken before they were handed to their masters, ensuring that they could not put up any resistance. But if he made a move on that half-elf, she would surely struggle like a frenzied beast. It was not difficult for Aria to break and conquer her. However, he would be hurt as well, and Aria was not confident in his ability to subdue live prey. As he lost himself in imagining how it would be like to punch Imina in the face several times, he was a second late in noticing that the elf in front of him had stopped moving. Why did you stop? Keep going. I heard a sound. A sound? Aria furrowed his brows as the elf plucked up the courage to reply. He concentrated on listening. The surroundings were silent, so quiet, in fact, that it made his ears hurt. I don't hear anything. Normally, he would have simply punched her right in the face, but elves had keener hearing than human beings. It might be that she had heard something which Aria had not. In order to verify that, he asked the two people beside him, "How about you lot?" "Why yes, I can hear something. It sounds like metal clashing against metal." "Is that so?" There was no way the sound of metal colliding with metal could occur naturally. In that case, it must surely have been made by someone. In other words, this might be the first fight since entering the tomb. As he thought of that, Aria's heart filled with excitement. We're going to check out the source of that sound. Why, yes. He let the elf slave walk ahead of him, and they traveled in the direction of the noise. Soon, Aria heard the sound of metal as well. It was the sound of an intense collision between one object and another, accompanied by boisterous roars and shouts. Is that the sound of another team fighting? I didn't think we crossed their path when we went forward, but it seems we've run into another team. What had been something like joy dampened in an instant, and Aria sighed dejectedly. Oh well, forget it. We might be able to back them up and kill some monsters. Aria continued toward the source of the sounds, but he began to feel strange. This did not sound like a battle. It was just like when he turned the corner, his doubts were answered. After turning the corner, he saw a wide, spacious room before his eyes. It was big enough that several dozen people could run around inside it. There were 10 lizard men in exquisitely crafted armor within the room. All of them wore collars which had broken chains attached to them, and the ends waggled in the air. They were swinging their swords within the room. Each mighty hack was deflected by an unhesitating parry. Scenes like that repeated themselves throughout the room. It might have looked like an intense battle, but Aria immediately saw that they were training. When Aria and the others entered the room, the lizard men stopped swinging their swords, which indicated that his guess had been correct. Apart from the lizard men, there was a gigantic fellow with a huge tower shield, and wearing black plate armor with blood vessel-like tracery on it, and one more person, or rather, one more creature. It was a massive magical beast, with a coat of silver-white fur, and a pair of intelligent-looking eyes. So thou hast come at last, intruder Dono. Talking magical beasts were often difficult opponents. Magical beasts were usually the sort who attacked by leveraging their powerful bodies, but some intelligent magical beasts could use magic as well. Aria was a genius swordsman, but his magical abilities were hardly exceptional. He channeled his strength into his core, steeled his soul, and prepared himself to resist hostile magic as he asked, "And you are?" There was no need to bother. Since it was here waiting for him, that implied that it was the guardian of these ruins. The question now was how powerful this guardian was. By its looks, it might even be the overseer of these ruins. In that case, killing this magical beast would be a great accomplishment. In other words, his team would be the most outstanding of all the other workers. Tenbu was a one-man team composed of Aruya himself, so that would mean that Aruya was the strongest of all the workers. Luck was also an important ability for workers. Someone hath appointed me to face thee, and perform several tests at the same time, but given thy strength, I fear it is somewhat insufficient. Disappointment and frustration surged through his heart. The former was because the magical beast was simply a watchman, and the latter was because it had scorned him. You're already looking down on me without even crossing blades with me? Oi. Why yes. The elf shuddered as her master addressed her. Doing so filled Aruya with satisfaction. This was the sort of attitude that he was entitled to. While it had just been a few days, he had to spend time around Mammon, a clearly superior class of being, and it had deeply displeased him. This eased the annoyance a little. What kind of creature is that? I'm very, very sorry. I haven't heard of a magical beast like that before. Che, you're useless. He smashed the useless elf's face with the hilt of his sword. The elf collapsed to the ground, shielding her face while frantically apologizing, but Aruya paid her no heed. Instead, he examined the magical beast's body. The magical beast was quite large. Fighting it head-on would be very unfavorable. However, magical beasts were generally very big, and Aruya had killed several magical beasts like this until now. There was no need to be afraid, or whatnot, of a magical beast he had not seen before. Of course, he had to be wary, but if he was too cautious and shrank from his foe, then he would be a coward. I have a question. What makes you think you can beat me? Well, it's obvious at a glance that you're very weak. Aruya's face twisted, and he tightened his grip on his sword. It seems those eyes of yours can't see anything. How about I help you cut those useless eyes out of your head? I pray thee spare me. Very well, my master hath ordered this one to slay thee here, so let us begin forthwith. It sounds extremely casual. That angered Aruya further. He wanted to dispense with the pleasantries and start swinging, but if he got angry and slashed at a magical beast who was taking things easy, he would end up feeling like someone had gotten the better of him. Therefore, he swallowed his anger and snorted. Let's do it, beast. Speaking of which, why dost thou delay? Will those elves not prepare as well? There's no need. You should be having those lizard men behind. They are not involved in this. The lizard men behind this one are merely to spectate the fight. Fret not about them. So you're throwing away your only chance of victory for nothing? How brave. I thank thee for thy praise. Taunting it had not worked. Perhaps this magical beast could speak, but it was not very intelligent. As Aruya pondered this, the creature's whiskers quivered as it addressed him. That said, this one must slay thee without mercy, so this one desires that thou assault me with all thy might. After all, as this one hath said before, this is also a test for this one. A test? For a watchdog. A test to see if this one's warrior prowess hath improved. All right, let us commence. This one shall not strike at the elves behind thee, but only at thy person. Do what you want. This one is known as Hamsuk. Remember the name of the one who claims thy life upon thy voyage to the next world. State thy name as well. Unfortunately, a mere beast like you doesn't deserve to know my name. Then this one shall erase you my memory as a nameless fool. The massive body charged over to him in an instant. There was no way he could have imagined such a large body moving so fast. A less talented warrior might have been shaken by the immense pressure bearing down on him, and he would have been unable to avoid